Ready to get back into our Father's Word here at the chapel. We invite you to get your Bible and join us if you'd care to today. We're going to pick it up in the book of Numbers, chapter 31, verse 5. And Moses had just been instructed by God to avenge Israel of the Midianites. And the reason for that, the Midianites had seduced Israel into idolatry. And God does not like people that mislead His children. Let's pick it up today. We'll ask that word of wisdom in Yeshua's precious name. Father, open eyes, open ears. Let's go with chapter 31, verse 5. So there were delivered out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 of every tribe, 12,000 armed for war, and 12,000 when they had over 601,000 in the army at their disposal from that recent numbering. But God knew how many it would take for the victory, and it's going to be an amazing victory in light that they're going up an army against an army that's probably got them outnumbered 3-1. Verse 6. And Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 of every tribe, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war with the holy instruments and the trumpets to blow in his hand. Now, these holy instruments, I think, are not the items of worship such as the altar of burnt offering or the table of showbread or anything of that nature. I think it is referring to the silver trumpets that we covered back in chapter 10. You remember the priests were to blow the trumpets to several call to action in the time of war, which is the case here. Also to call the princes of the tribes. Another signal was given when it was time to break camp and pull up the tent pegs and head for the next place of encampment. Verse 7, Phinehas, you might remember, the one who was so zealous for the Lord when he caught the Midianite woman with the Israelite man in the act of adultery, symbolic of idolatry, and he ran them both through with the javelin, which stopped the plague when 24,000 had died. A lot more probably would have died if not for the zealousness of Phinehas. And they warred against the Midianites, as the Lord commanded Moses, and they slew all the males. Well, they'll slay all the adult males. We'll see in the latter part of this chapter that they left the males who were not in the battle alive. Verse 8, and they slew the kings of Midian, and these were vassal kings of Sihon, king of the Amorites, beside the rest of them that were slain, namely Evi and Rechem and Zur. You may remember him, the father of Cosbi, who was the Midianite woman who Phinehas ran through with the javelin, and Hur and Reba, 5 kings of Midian. Balaam also, the son of Beor, they slew with the sword. And the last time we read of Balaam, it was back in chapter 24, verse 25, and he was headed in the direction of home. He would have been a whole lot better off if he would have kept going on home. But his heart changed forever with the greed that of the promise of glory and riches from Balak, the king of the Moabites. But we learn in verse 16 the reason that Balaam was slain was because he was the one who told Balak that the people of Midian and Moab could seduce Israel into idolatry. Verse 9, and the children of Israel took all the women of Midian captives, and their little ones, including the males, and took the spoil of all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods. The land that they are vacating at this point would become part of the land allotted to Reuben and Gad and half of Manasseh on the east side of Jordan, as we'll see when we get to chapter 32. And they burnt all their cities wherein they dwelt, and all their goodly castles with fire. Now, I had mentioned that the Midianites were nomadic peoples. They dwelt in tents. They weren't city builders or city dwellers. They moved from place to place with their considerable herds and flocks for the pasture land. So these cities and castles, no doubt, were built by the Amorites, Sihon, for example, and the Moabites. Verse 11, and they took all the spoil and all the prey, this being animated booty, you could think of, the animals, in other words, both of men, humans, and of beasts. Verse 12, and they brought the captives and the prey, these being the animals, and the spoil, this being gold chains, jewelry, things of that nature, which the nomadic peoples were known to value very much, even on their camels and their horses, unto Moses and Eleazar the priest, and unto the congregation of the children of Israel, unto, not into, but unto the camp at the plains of Moab, which are by Jordan near Jericho. And would Moses be pleased with what he saw? And Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the princes of the congregation went forth to meet them without the camp. Now, any time that someone had killed another person, even a soldier killing someone of the enemy in action, or had touched a human corpse, they were unclean for 7 days. And if you were unclean, you were not to be within the camp. And of course, they had to go through the purification process, a 7-day process that we covered back in chapter 19 of Numbers with the water of purification. Verse 14, and Moses was wroth with the officers of the host, with the captains over thousands, and captains over hundreds, which came from the battle. What in the world could Moses be angry about? And Moses said unto them, have ye saved all the women alive? And here we see dissatisfaction and reproof on the part of Moses. Moses was pretty mild-mannered as far as his own concerns, but when it came to matters of the Lord, he was very quick to become, his righteous indignation would flare up in a hurry. These were the same women who had seduced the men of Israel into worshiping Baal Peor and leading them into idolatry. Behold, these caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor, the same as Baal Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Do you all remember the 24,000 that were killed by the plague? And if not for Phinehas, a lot more of you would have died. 17. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, this effectively exterminating the Midianites. And kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. In other words, those who were not virgins could very well have been involved in leading the nation of Israel into idolatry. And some of you, I can just hear it, are saying, boy, the Lord is sure mean. No, the Lord is jealous of his children. He doesn't like it when people lead his children into worshiping other fake gods. And you know what? He's going to feel the same about those who falsely teach from the pulpits today and lead his children into believing in a false rapture doctrine, who lead his children into bed, spiritually speaking, with the Antichrist himself. And they're set up hook, line, and sinker to be deceived by the Antichrist. And God is going to feel just the way he does toward those who lead his children astray then as he does about these Midianites who led his children astray then. 18, But all the women children that have not known a man by lying with him, virgins in other words, keep alive for yourselves. And these, of course, would be made into servants. Verse 19, and do ye abide without the camp 7 days, because they were unclean, those who had been contaminated with death. Whosoever hath killed any person, and whosoever hath touched any slain, purify both yourselves and your captives, and the young girls, in other words, on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, as outlined back in chapter 19. We're getting a pretty good review of what we've covered in Numbers, that water of purification. One of the main ingredients, you'll recall, the ashes of a red heifer. Verse 20, and purify all your raiment, and all that is made of skins, and all work of goat's hair, and all things made of wood, all things that could not be passed through fire. It was necessary for them to be cleansed on the 3rd day and the 7th day in order for them to be considered clean again. Verse 21, and Eleazar the priest said unto the men of war which went to battle, this is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 22, only the gold and the silver, the brass, and this word in the Hebrew is nekosheth, and it actually is copper, brass being an alloy essentially made of copper and zinc. The iron and tin and the lead, in other words, all metals that could be passed through fire to purify them without melting them or burning them. 23, everything that may abide the fire, ye shall make it go through the fire, and it shall be clean. Nevertheless, it shall be purified with the water of separation. And all that abideth not the fire ye shall make go through the water. And in chapter 19, verse 19, the people were also required to wash their clothes and bathe themselves, and then they would be considered clean on that 7th day. And ye shall wash your clothes on the 7th day, and ye shall be clean. And afterward ye shall come into the camp. And this verses should, if you're familiar with Ezekiel chapter 44, verses 25 and 26, and the following verses, sound familiar to you, because in the millennium, God's elect, they're called the Zadok there in Ezekiel chapter 44, will be allowed in the presence of the millennial temple with Christ. However, and they will be allowed to go outside of the temple and assist, help their immediate family members who didn't make the first resurrection. But there is a price to pay. They will have been in the presence of the dead, the spiritually dead, and therefore they're not allowed to go in the presence of Christ for a period of 7 days. 25, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, it's time to divvy up the spoils of war. Take the sum, or the count, the booty, of the prey that was taken, both of man and of beast. Thou and Eleazar the priest, and the chief fathers of the congregation, the elders representing the people. And again, of the people left of Midian would be only young girls, virgins who had not lain with man. Verse 27, and divide the prey into 2 parts, 50-50, right down the middle, between them that took the war upon them, who went out to battle, and between all the congregation. The 12,000 who put their life at risk will receive half of the booty, and then the remaining 590,000, if you will, of the fighting men that were numbered will receive the other half. And levy a tribute. Now this word, check it out, tribute, mekez in the Hebrew, and it means to compute the computed value assigned to Yahweh. and the Lord. And the only time that you see that term is in this particular chapter. And levy a tribute unto the Lord of the men of war which went out to battle, one soul of 500, both of the persons and of the beeves and of the asses and of the sheep. And what's happening here is the Lord claiming for every 500 of the virgin Midianites, one he's claiming to be given to the priest as his representatives. For every 500 of the oxen or beeves, one was to be given to the priest. The percentage comes out to 1/5 of 1%. It will be a little bit higher for those who didn't risk life and limb in the war. 29, take it of, or from, probably better, their half, and give it unto Eleazar the priest for an heave offering of the Lord. And this, in all probability then, are actuality given to the priest for their maintenance, much as tithes were given as to the Lord, but then as his representatives among the people, the priest received it for their sustenance. And this heave offering, a thank offering for the victory. And don't say, look what I did with my own two hands. If God gives you the victory, and God most certainly gave them the victory in this war, as we'll see as we get toward the end of this chapter, give credit where credit is due and thank the Father. The leaders of the military will give more than what the Lord asked for of one of every 500, as we'll see. Verse 30. And of the children of Israel's half, these are those who do not go to war, thou shalt take one portion of 50, and that comes out to 2% rather than 1/5 of 1%. Of the persons, of the beeves, of the asses, of the flocks, flocks can be either sheep or goats. We'll see that the Midianites did not keep goats, but sheep only. Of all manner of beast, and give them unto the Levites, which keep the charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. And these for the benefit of the priest. And this didn't take on the same characteristic as a vow, because vows, the clean animals would have been offered to the Lord as a sacrifice. Unclean animals would have been sold, and the money, they would have to have been redeemed, as is outlined in Leviticus chapter 27, both the humans and the unclean animals. Verse 31, and Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. And as I said a moment ago, this is the only place in the Bible that you'll find where the Lord claimed a part of the booty. Now, under King David, the practice of sharing the spoils of war with the congregation pretty much became an accepted rule of thumb. You can read about in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 24 and 25, after David's victory over the Amalekites. Now, this is when David had basically a ragtag army of maybe 400, 500, 600 men. And you remember they went off to fight against, I believe it was the Ammonites, but the Amalekites came in and took everything that they had, including David's wives. David caught up with them and wiped them out, but then shared the booty with all of his army. 32, and the booty, being the rest of the prey which the men of war had caught, was 600,000 and 70,000 and 5,000 sheep. 675,000 sheep. Again, and that's not out of line. These were nomadic peoples, and they moved from place to place to keep enough pasture for their livestock. The total count, 675,000 sheep. That's a lot of sheep. And 12,000 beeves, 72,000 bakar in the Hebrew language, which is cattle. It's an Old English term, but also of a French word for oxen it is originated. and 61,000 asses, 71,000 donkeys, and 32,000 persons in all, of women that had not known man by lying with him, and 32,000 virgins. And in our last lecture, I estimated the army of the Midianites between 35 and 40,000. And if you take that number, you would have, and 32,000 virgins here, young girls, would put the overall population of the Midianites between 130 and 150,000 total population, and therefore that's how I arrived at an estimate of 35 to 40,000 men who were of fighting age. 36. And the half, which was the portion of them that went out to war, was in number 300,007 and 30,500 sheep. Obviously, half of the 675,000 sheep, 337,500. Now that would come out to approximately, you have 12,000 who went to war. Divide that by 300, or that into 337,500, and that comes out to more than 28 sheep per man who went to war. A pretty good payday, as booties and prey of war often were. 37. And the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 615. Of that, they're 1/5 of 1%. They gave 675 to the priests as the Lord's portion. 38. And the beeves were 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 312. 36,000, 1/2 of 1%, equaling 72 head of the beeves that went to the priest. 39. And the asses were 30,500, of which the Lord's tribute was 301. 30,500 of the asses, the Lord's portion, 61 head. Now, the asses probably were sold and being unclean animals, and their portion, the value of them went into the treasury of the sanctuary, no doubt. Verse 40. And the persons, these are the virgins, were 16,000, that's half of the 32, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 persons, probably assigned to menial labor, those assigned to the priest, carrying water, chopping wood, work that the priest normally would have done, but now giving them some help. I don't know how they would have divided up the 16,000. You had 12,000 fighting men. Their portion of the virgin slave girls was 16,000. I was curious how they divided them up among themselves. 41. And Moses gave the tribute, which was the Lord's heave offering, unto Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. Remember, these were required. We'll see additional free will offerings given by the leaders of the military in a moment. 42. Of the children of Israel's half, which Moses divided from the men that warred, those who didn't fight, in other words, and note that verses 43 through 46 is parenthetical. It's not in the original manuscripts. Those of you with companion Bibles, you have a note on that. In fact, an appendix in 6 in your companion Bible states this was inserted at a later point in time to explain the context. 43. Now the half that pertained unto the congregation was 300,000 and 30,000 and 7,500 sheep. Again, their half, 337,500. And 36,000 beeves, and 30,000 asses, and 500, and 16,000 persons. Verse 47. Even the children of Israel's half, those who did not go to war, Moses took one portion in 50, 2%, both of man and of beast, and gave them unto the Levites, which kept the charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. Now, the priest portion didn't amount to a whole lot when they got 1/5 of 1% of half of the spoils. But this, at 2%, came out to considerably more, because the 2% that the congregation would have given to the tabernacle, or the priest, would be 6,750 sheep, 720 cattle or oxen, 610 asses, and 320 of the young maidens. So a considerably higher number. You might ask, well, what in the world would the priest do with all those animals? Well, when they got into the promised land, the priest cities, well, in fact, every walled city, the priests were allocated a certain amount of land adjacent to the walls of the city. The larger the city, the more land that was given, because the land depended on how long the walls of the city were. But the priests were not given an inheritance in the land, don't misunderstand. But, of course, they had to have a place to keep their livestock, and these livestock got them a pretty good start in the promised land. 48. And the officers, which were over thousands, of the host, the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds, came near unto Moses. Now, these are the officers who led the 12,000 fighting men into war. It's time to take a casualty count. And they said unto Moses, Thy servants have taken the sum, or the count, of the men of war which are under our charge. In the Hebrew, this is under our hand. Today, we would probably more likely say under their command. And there lacketh not one man of us. Wow. Do you understand that? 12,000 went to war against 35 to 40,000 of the Midianites, and they didn't lose one soldier, not one man. I'll tell you, that's the side I want to be on when we go to war, and we are going into a spiritual war in the very near future. I encourage you to be on the side that God is not going to allow one to be lost. Verse 50. We have therefore brought an oblation. These are the officers, they continue, a voluntary offering for the Lord. What every man hath gotten of jewels, of gold, chains and bracelets, rings, earrings, and tablets, to make an atonement for our souls before the Lord. They're saying here, we just simply are not worthy of God's grace and keeping us alive and all of our men alive when we went into battle. So they're offering as a free, truly a free will offering. God didn't claim part of that. He did claim part of the other booty and prey, and they're doing this of their own accord, giving God the credit for their victory and for the preservation of not only their lives, but the lives of their men as well. 51, and Moses and Eleazar the priest took the gold of them, even all the wrought jewels. 52, and all the gold of the offering, the heave offering, that they offered up to the Lord, of the captains of thousands and of the captains of hundreds, was 16,750 shekels. That's a lot of gold, my friends. 53, for the men of war had taken spoil, every man for himself, the spoils of war. And, you know, at this time, often men would offer themselves up as mercenaries. I don't think very much of mercenaries as far as soldiers, but they would literally make themselves available to fight for a particular nation in hopes that they would be able to take some of the spoils and the booty of war. They'd risk their life for the opportunity to share in the booties and spoils of war. 54, And Moses and Eleazar the priest took the gold of the captains of thousands and of hundreds and brought it into the tabernacle of the congregation for a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord, no doubt placed in the treasury of the sanctuary. Now, chapter 32, we have a little situation comes up now. The land, a lot of it on the east side of Jordan, has been vacated by the war with the Midianites. And Reuben and Gad and half Manasseh had a lot of cattle and flocks, and they saw that the land was good, had a lot of water, and they said, let us take our land here on this side of the Jordan. Let's get started in chapter 32, verse 1. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of cattle. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that behold, the place was a place of cattle. And they had a lot of cattle. And these are regions on the east of Jordan, Jazer and Gilead. A lot of people referred to them over the centuries as paradise because of the prized pasture lands and access to water. The children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spake unto Moses and to Eleazar the priest and unto the princes of the congregation, saying, half tribe of Manasseh would also be included with this petition of Reuben and Gad. We had regions mentioned, now cities. Verse 3, Ataroth and Dibon and Jazer and Nimrah and Heshbon and Elealeh and Shebam and Nebo and Beon. All of these cities on the east side of Jordan. Verse 4, even the country which the Lord smote. Who smote the country of the Midianites? Well, remember, they didn't lose one soldier on the Israelites' army, so pretty obvious who smote them. Before the congregation of Israel is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle, plenty of pasture, plenty of water. Verse 5, wherefore say they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over Jordan. And boy, I can see the wheels turning in Moses' head as they petition him with that request. You remember what happened back in chapter 14 when the people would not go into the promised land? That was God's will, that he bring them out of Egypt and take them into the promised land, the land of Canaan. Now the Gadites and the Reubenites and half of Manasseh are saying, we don't want to go into the promised land. Moses is probably thinking, uh-oh, here we go again. But he'll take their petition to the Lord, being the intercessor that Moses is. Don't miss the next lecture, and we'll see what the Lord said to the people of Gad and Reuben and half Manasseh with their request to take their inheritance, take their land of milk and honey on the east side of Jordan. We've got a short message. We'll ask you to listen a moment, won't you please?